Well, this gentleman's to my right set the new altitude record here at the Trenton Indoor Races. Steve Craig, what a ride last night, but you're back here less than 24 hours later, ready to go.
Yeah, that was probably the worst flip I've ever taken with the least damage to my race car. I was quite surprised when they brought it back in and saw that it really wasn't hurt that bad. So we made a couple pieces for it this morning, and we're back at it.
It seemed like everything happened so quickly. What was going through your mind? Did you even have time to think about what was happening?
No, I knew Brett was inside me, and I knew we'd made contact, but we were on the gas hard at that point, so it really just did happen that quickly. Although, you know, when you're flipping like that and it's that violent, that snappy, I was waiting for it to stop. I was like, okay, it can stop any minute now. So,
did you know where you were when you ended up in the stage?
Oh yeah, I knew exactly where I was. Yeah, I knew where I was. So
of course, you have run midget type race cars before, open wheel race. You know what happens when wheels make wheel contact.
Yeah, and that's why, generally speaking, there's. If you noticed in the NASCAR Sprint Cup series, there's an awful lot of open wheel guys that are racing now, and that's because they know how to pass people without running into one another. So it's generally we try and avoid that, although indoor racing is a bit of a contact sport, you know. So
talk about the history of this car and your involvement in the sport. You've been around for decades.
Yeah, this car is interesting. This car was bent up in the initial tubing was bent in the early 80s by a guy named Don Crabtree, and he tacked it together and gave it to my father about 6 or 7 years later and said, "This has been sitting around, weld this thing together, will you?" And then my dad welded it together and ran it for a couple of years, and then it sat around for 20 or 25 years. And when they started running Atlantic City again, we went and watched, and I was like, man, we can't just watch, we got to drag something out and run it. So I did a couple updates, put some down tubes on it, and put a Suzuki in it, and I've been cutting it apart and putting it back together ever since. Steve Buckwalter just bent up a 1 3/8 midget cage for me, and I just grafted that on. I'm glad I did. So
yeah, very good safety features in the car, and here you are, okay. Hey, last thing for you, Steve. One of the more unique things about the indoor circuit is the variety of race cars. If you look around here, you've seen mini super modifieds, home-built creations, antiques. It's amazing. This is one of the last forms of motorsports where you really have some creativity left for the car owner.
That's so true. When my dad raced in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and you know, we always made our own stuff. You know, we made you know, almost everything. Now, you know, with the midget that I run, you know, I virtually buy everything, and there's not a whole lot more to that car that I could even think of doing that would make it better. Where these cars, particularly one that's this old, and you can see I've been slicing and dicing on this forever. If I don't like something, I get the whizzer wheel out, cut it off, and I'll weld something else on. And there's quite a number of cars. There are some guys that are running Lafler chassis that are awful fast, and that's becoming more of that, you know, cookie cutter. You want to go fast, go buy one of those cars. But there still are an awful lot of cars here that are, you know, very unique. I mean, the car that Mike Lichty's driving has a fiberglass leaf front spring in it. If you want to take a picture of that, that's highly unusual. That car runs great. He's won a bunch of features, so it's fun. That's what makes this fun, is that, you know, some of the parts we buy, like the winner's rear I bought, and you know, the engine, you know, it's just basically a pretty stock Suzuki engine. But everything else, it's like, you know, we make, you know.
We're glad you're okay, and we're glad you're here having fun. It looks like it's a blast out there.
Thank you very much.
Best of luck.
Thank you.
Steve Craig hoping for better things here on the main event tonight here in Trenton.